Hey everyone, this is day 1, week 3. So the important thing to remember about this week is that we have to paint from life. So we have to adapt the way we work, and we have to try, and paint from life. I'm going to be doing it. That's why I'm wearing my glasses, because I'm short-sighted. And if I wanted to paint from life and not wear these, I would paint something as blurry as the video that we that we shot last week that we couldn't post. So the important thing is to just set something up. You don't have to do a very elaborate setup. We have to do a setup because since this is our apartment, we actually have to again scavenge for a place where light kind of makes sense. It makes sense for you guys, as viewers, so that you can see the video properly, so the paint isn't glaring. I mean, this is so hard to do. If there's one thing that's tough about making a video of oil painting, it's glare. It's terrible. It's so hard. Usually you have to have like lights with gels and the filter on your camera, and those are, you can't do it that way, but it's such a production that it's ridiculous. We kind of want to keep it, normal in here. So that's why many of you guys have noticed that just the lighting, maybe the white balance and the lighting in our videos just changes. It's because it changes dramatically here too. We have a big window, and sometimes the sun just kind of filters in, and at times, there's a big cloud and the sun just leaves. And I paint with daylight. That's the way I've always painted my whole life. That's, the light that I appreciate the most. I can paint under halogen lights, but I don't know, if I could pick something, I would always paint with natural light. Always. So you guys are gonna always see what I see. If light changes, then that's what you're gonna get. But we have to try to find a spot in our apartment where we can put some lights and then set something up really simply, so I can paint from life. So I'm gonna be painting from life. I'm gonna try to make it also, be around 3-4 hours of painting. And for this week, it's pretty simple. So it's early in the morning. It's just show me what you're gonna have for breakfast or what you had for breakfast. It's a little bit easier if it's what you had. Because if you're gonna stare, if you're hungry in the morning and you're gonna stare at something for 3 hours while you paint it, and it's just right there, I wouldn't be able to do it. Like, I would go for the breakfast right then and there. And this whole thing would turn into like a Dwayne Kaiser animated painting video. He's a genius, by the way. So we're not gonna do that. We're gonna try to set something up nicely, either before, breakfast or after breakfast. Just tell me what you had. I'm gonna show you what I had. Today it's gonna be a banana. I'm struggling to see if I do the banana or the banana peel. So we'll see how that goes. But remember, this week, just paint from life. Just make an effort as the truck goes by. Just paint from life, okay? I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's a little bit harder than just staring at a photo. But let's try to make it just 1 week during the month, paint from life, okay? Let's do this. For those of you who have wondered what I do in terms of priming, it's not, at all different from what I've done, in the past with my moleskin pages. It's just 3 coats of transparent acrylic binder. I use one. The brand name is PBO. And the product is called Bindex. But honestly, in terms of the actual product, it doesn't matter. You can use any transparent acrylic binder. Why transparent? Because if I do an underdrawing, and I want to see my drawing, then after I primed my surface, then if it's transparent, then I have access to my drawing. It's a very, very simple thing. So I do 3 coats on one side, and I do 1 or 2 coats on the back. You need to coat the back. It's more of a balancing issue. It's just so your paper doesn't warp. So if you have the same kind of, think about it in terms of these kind of strengths that are pulling your paper, one from warping the paper from the front and one warping the paper from the back. If they balance each other out, then your paper is going to be as in as much equilibrium as you can get it. If you want to do three coats on in the front and then three coats in the back, that's totally fine. And the thing that I also do, and you may have noticed with the last few paintings, is that I'm using a mid-value gray to do like to cover my painting, and I'm using Holbein acrylic to do that. And they actually sell a gray set. I don't think they have every step of gray, but I think they have the odd numbers. So you can get, I think it's gray number 3, 5, 7, and maybe 9, maybe. I bought 5 and 7, so I have a mid-tone and I have a lighter one. I think I'm using the lighter one actually here. I'm not really sure, but regardless, it's a mid value. You can use something that has a hue to it if you don't want to use just strictly a gray. I use gray because I don't really know what I'm going to paint. I would be choosing a ground of a different hue and different saturation. I remember, for example, SteveIssel, my teacher, would sometimes have literally like a cat red and cat orange ground, which was just in my mind, it's insane to paint in that ground, but he made it just work beautifully because all of that saturation was filtering through his shadows. When he put like his darker, more transparent shadows, it would filter through, and it just felt like it's almost like there's blood underneath, in your shadow mask when he was painting, obviously, portraits. So they felt very, very much alive. So again, you don't have to use a mid-tone. It doesn't have to be a neutral. For me, it's a little bit easier to do it that way because I prime my pages a couple of days beforehand before I'm painting, and because I don't really know what I'm going to paint. If you have a neutral, then it's kind of like the best of both worlds. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. So just to summarize, it's about 3 coats of a transparent acrylic binder in the front and 2 coats in the back. And then for these last few paintings, I have been using a ground, which is Holbein's gray, because they are grays, acrylic. And it's totally fine to put acrylic on top, obviously, of acrylic, transparent acrylic binder. That's going to sit super nicely on top. A lot of people don't like to paint on top of acrylic because it does have this very plasticky feel to it. It's kind of rubbery, so your brush does kind of slip and slide a little bit. A lot of people love that. A lot of people want to have tooth in their surfaces. With this paper, I don't know if moleskin paper is exactly hot pressed. It doesn't quite feel like a hot pressed paper, but it is very, very smooth. So a lot of people don't like that. A lot of people prefer to work on paper that would be more suitable for watercolor or gouache, just so that it has some pulp to it, some texture to it. That is totally up to you. I actually am going to use a ton of different surfaces during these 2 years. So it's going to be nice to see how obviously my painting is going to be affected. And I mean, for the last 20 years, I've used, I think I've painted on every surface imaginable. So that's not going to be an issue for me. So, but the beautiful thing is to see how our painting can adapt to that particular surface. Now, specifically getting into this painting, I wanted for this first painting that was going to be painted from life, I wanted to do something that was very almost abstract and very raw, very pure, very simple, just simple shapes. And initially I thought of a banana, but I have like the Ewan Uglo banana in my head, and I can't get that out of my head because that's like a perfect painting of a banana. Like every facet of that banana is just beautifully rendered and modeled, and yeah, as almost with every single Uglo painting, it just turns wonderfully in space. Like the color relationships by themselves just turn, every single form that he paints. That's why he can paint something that we would associate with, it being almost formless or seamless, and he can make it turn just because he sees breaks in in the form, and every time he sees a break in the form, he actually gives it a very specific value and a very specific hue. So every time he sees a shift, that shift for him signifies a new mix, and that's why he kind of pieces this puzzle that is his painting together. So I thought of doing the banana, and I was like, no, I'm first of all, if you buy local bananas from Colombia, they are the ugly small banana. We don't have like this perfect, picture perfect banana. It's just they're always very small, ugly. They always have like these dark spots, or what you would consider, what people would consider ugly, but it's just a natural, it's what naturally this fruit looks like. So I really liked the fact that I was starting with something that's just not inherently pretty to paint, and I thought, okay, I ate it. I actually ate it, and then I had my peel, and I just kind of dropped it and tried to shape it. I didn't try to force it also either, because I don't like things that are just too placed when I'm painting them. So I tried to just place it naturally so that it felt organic. And then I realized this still feels very much so alive. And then it got me thinking, an issue that I have, and it's not that I can't acknowledge the value of still life, of more traditional still life painting, but an issue I have with older still life painting, and by older I mean like, let's say, like Jan Davids, like the 17th century Baroque Dutch still life painting, which is it's a whole school. I mean, technically it's the most adept way to paint like a still life. It's absolutely beautiful, sumptuous, sensible. It's so, again, those are some of the most beautifully painted paintings in our history. But the one problem I have with that is that it's just that it looks fake. It doesn't, those are not fruits. I don't care if they lived 400 years ago. That's not the fruit that I eat. Like, those are not. I've never seen grapes like that. I've never seen a lobster like that. I've never seen oysters like that. When I see the fruit, it just doesn't feel like it has juice in it. It doesn't. If I see oysters, they don't smell. If I see a lobster, it just doesn't smell like fish. It just doesn't feel like it's been pulled out of the sea. There's again, and I know this. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm nitpicking, but I always felt it's like the a still life, or actually in Spanish it's a lot more beautiful. I know the translation just can't happen literally, but it's dead nature. It's if I would try to translate it, naturaleza muerta in to English, instead of still life, it would be dead nature, and I like that deadness. But stillness, I think it goes against a nature of an object that was very much so alive. And stillness almost means that, you want to, it's almost like Damien Hirst's shark. You just want to preserve it. And I don't like that. I don't like when painting, for some reason, is associated with permanence. I've never, ever understood why, when we paint, we feel that the painting will survive. It will survive the sitter, and then if you're doing a portrait generations later, the family will be able to appreciate the presence of whomever was depicted in the portrait because of painting. Because people die, but paintings don't. I don't like that at all. I can't understand why something that comes from nature. Because if you think traditionally, linen comes from nature, oil comes from nature, pigments come from nature. They are subjected to the same natural laws that we are as human beings. But for some reason, we think that when we human beings put them together, then they have to behave in a way that is not true to their nature. And they have to survive. And we're all super worried when a painting cracks and when, varnish yellows, and we have to clean those up, and we have to retouch the painting if something happens to it. It's like, oh, it's fine if we age, but you can't. It's like we're holding on to this idea that yes, we may be impermanent here. You know, it's this futile life, and we are going to die. But at least our actions and you know, specifically our creative endeavors that, you know, in our case, that produce a painting, those will survive. I don't like that. I really, really don't like that. I just can't understand it. So I want it, in my case, I just want to be, for this first painting of this, you know, painting from life week, I wanted a peel that looks like a peel, that feels like a peel, that it feels like, you know, it's slowly kind of, because it was shrinking while I was painting it. And that's what I miss. That's what I miss when I see those beautiful Dutch still life paintings, is that there's no urgency to them. You know, it's literally like, okay, these things are going to stay still. And some people would say, well, you know, therein lies the masterful quality of it, because things were decaying, and they you know, they were able to understand like the essence of a fruit and keep that alive throughout, you know, this very prolonged uh, uh, painting, because I'm sure it took months to do many of these paintings, perhaps even years. So I I understand that. I understand the technical aspects, and the technical mastery of those paintings is unequaled. It is. You simply can't paint better in that sense. But I think there's a disconnect between what is being painted and how it's painted. And I don't think the how should impose itself over the nature of the things that we are painting. I much rather, and this is when I started to like still life painting. It was with Chardin, with the French painter, and this was only like 100 years later. But the difference to me is substantial. It's enormous, because Chardin's paintings felt alive when he was doing his ray, for example. That ray stinks. You know, that was alive, and it's hanging, and it's kind of oozing, and you know, you can kind of it smells, while the other painting is just all the other paintings, the Dutch paintings 100 years before, are just an attack on your senses, because they just feel sensual. They just, you know, you can almost caress every single object in a painting. Chardin's like attacked your senses. It just, you know, it was like, this is, if you could feel the texture of that ray, even though Chardin was a far more, let's say, impressionistic and, you know, quote unquote, painter in a way, because he was far more direct with his brush. And that's when I started to say, wow, there is a relationship between subject matter and the way it's been painted. There I felt a sense of urgency. You know, you actually could kind of tell that these things were stinking up your studio while you were painting them. And even though I was like a couple feet away from this peel, just like yeah, maybe 2 feet away, it stunk of banana. I was like that's a banana. That's what it does. And I was like, I need to get this kind of scruffy quality, but it also kind of like serpentine quality, but it's this thing, this ugly thing that is a banana peel, and I want to paint that. So it was very good, but because it put me in the mindset that I don't want to do still lifes. I mean, when you're painting food, yeah, you want to make food that's kind of scrumptious and you want to eat it, but you also want to be true to its nature. By the way, that Chardin's painting, the Ray painting, there's a nice connection there, because that painting was actually copied by Matisse. It was actually studied by Matisse. And Matisse actually was, I don't know if it was in Cormon's class, but he knew Soutine, who was an amazing painter. And Soutine was very much so aware of Dutch, you know, still life painting, even so much so that he painted, he kind of copied Rembrandt's paintings of the carcass of the hanging beef carcass, which is absolutely incredible. I think it was an oxen carcass as a beef carcass. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say it in English, but He did that, and he also did rays, which are crazy. I mean, because Soutine was almost like a like a just almost like abstract expressionist painter. Uh, but I think that I have more of a connection with those paintings. And again, we don't have to share, you guys don't have to share my sensibility, but I have more of a connection with those paintings that again, to me, the exact word is urgency. When you're painting from life, you are painting this fleeting moment. You are painting this thing that either is alive and is moving and cannot stay still. I mean, it's in its nature not to stay still. Or you're painting something that was alive and it's just slowly dying, but it's dying like right in front of your eyes. And that movement, that perception of those slow movements, it's just, I mean, it's anguish when you're painting. You really have to feel that. So I like when those things are present in my painting. So perhaps when I was painting this, for sure, I also was thinking or reminding myself of Manet, which is very much in line with Chardin. So that kind of tradition does make sense for me to make that connection. But Manet was also a big brush, just a couple of strokes, just you are trying, you're racing against this the nature of things that you're losing. I always kind of tell people it is a battle that you've already lost. You're not going to be able to paint this kind of last gasp of air that this banana had, but you can try to acknowledge it. You can try to be sensitive to it, and you can try to get that, and you can just go for it and attack it, because there can't you can't possibly patiently be observing and sensibly painting something that is just drifting away from you. It's just to me, again, that seems like a disconnect. And I don't. It's not that I don't appreciate those other paintings. It's just that when and it happens to all of us, but when I go to a museum and I look at them, I know, as a painter, I'm like in awe, and I'm like, whoa, this is, again, this is mastery of a technique, and this takes, decades, years of sacrifice to get to this place. But then but it doesn't say anything to me. It just doesn't. But then I see a Manet painting a dead fish, and I'm like, okay, that's, it's slimy and it stinks, and if I would try to grip it with my hands, it would slip. I feel that, I sense that, and that to me is the mark of just a masterful still life. There doesn't have to be much to it. It just has to convey this race that you're in to try and get something. And the awesome thing about painting from life is that, when compared to painting from a photograph, is that you are sensitive to those tiny changes in light, those tiny little movements that this. Again, I'd like to believe that this banana peel was breathing. It was kind of morphing into this flatter shape, and it was happening right in front of my eyes, and I loved it. I initially wanted to do like a dominant yellow hue over the whole painting. I thought it was nice, and perhaps like Manet's Matador painting, where he felt that he had to crop the bull from the top, so now you all we see is like the Matador, the reclining dead Matador painting. I felt like there was way too much kind of ochre up top, and that a lot of the surrounding ochreish was taking away from the little bits of yellow, like yellow accents in the banana that I wanted to push. So what I did was this: I actually took my complementary color, and that was a break in my plane. So I'm following what was there spatially, but I thought if I gave this kind of nice violet I could offset the yellows, and it actually made all the yellows pop a lot more. So I'm happy I did that. And I was always very mindful of how much I wanted to do, how much I wanted to suggest, and how much and how simple I wanted to leave the painting. And in the end, I was happy that for this first one, I I responded to my sensibility and I said, no, this has to be about, again, this has to be about me already surrendering myself to something that I just can't apprehend. And the best I can do is just go for it and speak about this kind of squirming, dead shape. Again, last gasp of air. and I was like, okay, I have to leave it like that. It has to be a testament of who I am and what I'm trying to do with my painting. So I think that was an awesome, awesome first, painting from life experience. That's what we're going to do the whole week. It is going to change a little bit. I know that for me, every single painting is a new beginning, and I have to adjust myself, and I have to adjust my intent, and then I have to see if I can make my painting, bend to my intent. So you guys are probably going to see, different ways of how my, what I observe is asking me to do something a little bit different every single painting session. But this was very cool for this one, so I'm pretty pleased, and I'm glad I was true to my own sensibility. Making a nice painting, that's always going to be there, but being honest to what you believe paintings should be, and paintings as reflection of nature, is to me far more important than that honesty. If you really want to paint for years, decades, you can't lie to yourself. It makes absolutely no sense. Painting will immediately just let the viewers know that you are lying, that there is no honesty. You can't hide that. You'll never be able to hide that when you paint. So I think this was true to what I was going for. So I'm very pleased with it. Okay, so that's it. So remember, paint from life. If it's 20 minutes, just attack that painting for 20 minutes. If you could do it for half an hour, that's great. If you could do it for a couple of hours a day, that's amazing. But if not, don't feel bad. Like, this is not meant to make people feel bad. Again, this is just me company, and it's hopefully a reminder of all the amazing things that this observation can give to your life as a whole, not just as a painter. Okay, so thank you. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.